this is a perfect example of us digging our own grave, because we taught the Israeli intelligence service everything we knew. And then they pragmatically also went to all of our enemies and learned everything they knew, right? Where we stand on our, like, this is something I've never understood. The United States, like, rejects the opportunity to learn from any other intelligence service.
We do?
Yeah. Outside of the Five Eyes, we don't invite, we don't let ourselves learn anything from anybody else. And it's because when you let a foreign intelligence service come train you in their techniques, you're also exposing your officers to their officers, and you're creating what's known as a counterintelligence risk. Because now those officers that you just invited in could potentially turn your officers, right? They could make double agents out of your officers. So to avoid that risk, the CIA just says, you know what? We're going to learn what we need to learn from our trusted Five Eyes partners, and we'll just watch everybody else.
But Mossad doesn't do this.
Mossad doesn't do this. Very few other countries do this at all, right? During the war on ISIS, right? In the war on ISIS, the United States and Russia and Iran were all on the same page to fight ISIS. So there was all sorts of military cooperation.
Yeah.
There was diplomatic cooperation. There was funding that was being shared between these three enemies against one shared common threat. That was a perfect opportunity for us to learn from Iranians and Russians how they execute operations against ISIS. But we didn't do that. Instead, we celebrated the fact that the Russians and the Iranians were letting us train them in our techniques, because that meant that the Iranians and the Russians were giving their intelligence services, they were opening their intelligence services to American officers going in who might be able to turn Israelis or Russians and Iranians, right? That's what we think of as a victory.
You're saying we're thinking about it wrong.
We're thinking about it all wrong.
Yeah.
So when Russia opened its doors to let American intelligence officers in, what it did is it learned our techniques, and it still gave them access to our fucking officers. So it could still try to turn our officers. So it's ludicrous when we think that it's best to block our own, like, not learn from others because we don't let them in, therefore we don't expose ourselves to the risk. When we still introduce officers into other training scenarios, only now it's a give situation only. We're giving them more information, we're giving them more access, we're giving them more opportunity. So Russia, China, Iran, Israel, Turkey, Germany, Spain, they're all learning our best techniques and the best techniques of everybody else they train with, where we're limiting ourselves to really only learning from our Five Eyes partners. And our Five Eyes partners may not share everything with us intentionally or unintentionally. They may just simply forget to share this thing because they think maybe we already know it, right? So when the Canadians learn something new, or when the Aussies learn something new, or the Brits learn something new, that doesn't mean they're guaranteed to share it with us. They might use it for their own competitive advantage.
And you think, like, say among the Five Eyes, there is somewhat of a trusting relationship there?
There is the most trusting relationship there.
But not, there's no such thing as pure trust.
Correct. There's a very famous quote that says, there are no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests.
That's a good quote.
And that's our way of understanding that today's friend could become tomorrow's enemy.
Yeah. So you had said, like, obviously we have this one-way door policy that's not ideal for, I guess, like spy training and stuff like that. But you also said a lot of what compromises Mossad today and other forms of Israeli intelligence is based on what we taught them. At some point there, though, you know, the one-way door turns into them now using some of those to spy on us as well. And on everything I look at, that seems to have happened fucking 5 decades ago. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they've been a major intelligence risk. Israel's been a major intelligence risk to the United States for a long time. That's why they're on the list of countries that we have to limit our fraternization with, our friendships with, when it comes to being a professional intelligence officer. That's the red light or whatever you call it. Yeah. We call that a non-frat list. There's a list of countries that we cannot fraternize with, which means you can't have a personal relationship with anybody from those countries. And the non-frat list is a classified list, right? So I can't talk about who is or isn't on the list. But the list actually exists. You can compromise, you can be pulled out of your profession for fraternizing when you shouldn't fraternize. And you can still have relationships with people from those non-frat countries.
But you have to report them.
Bingo. And you have to document essentially in detail every element of the relationship.
So you don't really have to document with countries who aren't on that list, technically?
Correct.
That's interesting. I would assume you kind of have to document everything. I would have thought that.
It's just a different level of documentation, right? So if I meet...
Special.
If I meet a Spanish citizen and we go out and have a beer together, I might report in like 2 sentences that I met this Spanish citizen named so-and-so and we had a beer together on this day. And if we become friends, I might only have to submit 1 report every 2 or 3 months. Right. I'm still friends with this person, right? If I have sex with somebody, now I've got to report that I've had sex with a foreign national. But I don't have to report how many times we had sex. I don't have to report in what hotel we had sex. I don't have to do any of that. With a non-frat country, if you go down any of those roads, you're talking about very detailed documentation because the idea is a non-frat country is one that is trying to potentially cultivate you for an intelligence source.
That would seem, hypothetically, if Israel were on that list, that would seem very operationally difficult during, say, the era you were around, which is in the middle of the global war on terror, which they're obviously heavily involved with because they're in the middle of that area of the world.
So you've got to remember, too, that anywhere there's a policy, there's always an exception to the policy, right? For example, Russia's under sanctions right now, right?
Yeah.
Not when it comes to NASA, not when it comes to space exploration, not when it comes to
Really?
space operations.
I don't know anything about this.
There's a carve-out. So we can still work with cosmonauts. NASA can still work with the Russian Space Administration. Like, these things are still allowed. And there's other carve-outs too. There's always carve-outs, right? Even in the tariffs right now, right? China has all these massive tariffs, except pharmaceuticals and high technology. We're gonna carve those things out, right?
A few donors made sure on that one. Oh my God. What is going on with China though? And context here. Quick first question. Back in 2020, after the election, or I'll even say 2021, once Biden was in, did you envision A, Trump running for office again, and B, him actually winning in or having a good shot to win in 2024? Let's start there.
So I did not anticipate Donald Trump would run again. I did not because of a lot of reasons. But no, to answer your first question, I didn't anticipate that he would run again. When he announced that he would run again, right away you're like, there's a chance this guy could win.
You did think that.
I did think that. I think most people who objectively look at the world in that moment realize, like, Donald Trump does have a chance. His base never really reduced. And if anything, the fact that Biden was having so many issues and the world was in so much turmoil, it really did lend to the fact, like, this guy could win. He could win because we always talk about the last impression. Well, we didn't always talk about it. We talked about it today. The last impression is the impression that lasts. Don't forget that Donald Trump's first term was a predominantly successful term.
Define the success just for people out there.
It just ended poorly, right?
With the COVID. But what would you say was the success?
I mean, we had huge success in the stock market. You had massive growth in industry. You had this increasing rise in the idea of like patriotism and the patriotic American. You had strong American presence all over the world. People saw America as essentially like a strong arm, a bully again.
Some of his Middle East foreign policy was pretty decent too.
Yeah, so he had lots of victories, and I mean, even the most left leaning media out there will still list his objective victories.
They will?
Oh yeah, because you can't argue.
Missed that segment.
You can't argue with them for those 4 years. They won't list more than 3 or 4, and then they'll list all of his flaws, right? But there are certain objective realities that you can't fault Donald Trump. And then COVID happened. And here's what's fascinating to me.
The China virus.
The COVID disaster was how his presidency ended. But it took 4 fucking years before we realized, oh, maybe his opinions on COVID or his policies on COVID weren't as wrong as we thought they were, right? Maybe now that we realize that COVID is an endemic virus that's never going to go away. And
his eventual policies.
His potential policies.
His eventual, meaning like not the stuff he had in March and April 2020.
Right. Yeah.
Just want to clarify.
Yeah, thank you. So it took us 4 years to realize that maybe he wasn't as wrong as we all believed he was because of the election machine in 2020 or 2019, right? So that's what ended up happening with Donald Trump. So when he announced that he would run again, I don't think anybody of a right mind could have said that he had no chance. I think we all had to be like, this guy has like a chance. Was it a 99% sure thing? No. But you could literally watch his opportunity, his impact, his popularity grow almost week to week.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the whole thing with him, and I've said this on a bunch of podcasts before, but it's like, obviously the whole January 6th thing had a lot of crazy stuff around that has come out later and all that. But if you just go back in time to January 7th, 2021, all the Democrats had to do was just back up. Just go like this. Be like, not say anything. You don't have to punch the guy. He's down. He's down.
Yeah.
When you punch him, you give him what he wants. On January 8th, this is where it began when you look at the clock. On January 8th, 2021, he got canceled off the whole internet, which was wild because for a whole litany of reasons. He was still in office too at the time. So it was the first little check mark of like making him a victim. And then he got impeached after the fact, which, people could make the argument they wanted to do that or needed to, whatever it is. Another little check mark because he won, right? Another little check mark that he's a victim. Then a year and a half later, the FBI goes in and raids his wife's panty drawers and throws, you can say whatever you want. These were bullshit charges they threw. Anyone with half a brain can look at this and be like, what are we even talking about here? Made him a bigger victim. And then they throw more trials at him in New York, and they say this, and that's a Democratic legislature. Make him a victim again. And then he gets shot and does objectively, like to this day, did one of the biggest goosebumps moments I've ever seen in my life. Every time I watch it, I mean, you can't fake that. Like that dude was about it when he got up and had like the most American moment in modern history at the end of that, where it's like they literally almost... I'm using that very subjectively here, right? The guy, let's just say the guy literally almost had his head blown off. And he just became he was an underdog. They took a guy who had been president of the fucking United States, a billionaire, and they made him an underdog. So as it went along, like by the time he got shot, I'm like, all right, I see where this is going. Like he's going to win.
I think we had this conversation actually.
We did.
Either via text or something else, but we definitely were like, he just won the election.
Yeah, it was like right after it happened. But point being, in the bill, that took a while for that to get to that point, to July 2024. But I'm asking this because a while back, before he had even declared his candidacy, that's when you were saying, as someone who is certainly well-read on China, I'll leave it at that, that's when you were saying you think that in the build-up to the 2024 election, China could take Taiwan. As Trump began to actually become like, oh shit, he might be the guy, did that change your opinion on that take?
I mean, lots of things changed the opinion on that take, because this is the blessing and the curse of Intel, right? Intel is never 100% guaranteed. For what people don't understand is intelligence isn't even what's known. The term intelligence in a professional environment, the term intelligence means an educated guess based off of the information that's available at the moment. That's what intelligence is. So all Intel professionals understand. Once you know something, that's a fact. It's not Intel. What you don't know that you assess with a certain amount of probability, that's what Intel is. As soon as it's known, it's a fact. It's no longer an Intel, right? If it's a secret that's discovered, it becomes a fact. What they will do with that secret is the Intel. So in all the movies, whenever you find like that high stakes moment where they're like, oh, the intel was bad. Well, it just means that the probability of the intelligence assessment wasn't what actually happened on the field. And all professionals know that. Tier 1 operators know that. Fighter pilots know that, right? Littoral surface warfare people know that. Intelligence collectors know that. So whenever we talk about assessments, we're talking about the predominant idea at the moment. As an example, as of today, right, late April, the 23rd of April, as of today, intelligence estimates are that Israel will bomb Iranian nuclear facilities within the next 6 months. So that means April, May, June, July, August, September, October. By October, as of today, the assessment is that Israeli air fighter jets will bomb nuclear facilities in Iran. At the same time, Donald Trump has nuclear policy he's trying to clear with Iran. Iran's, in negotiations with the United States. There's all sorts of stuff at play that could change that, but that is the assessment today. What happened over the period of time from 2021 to 2024 is you saw multiple things take place. You saw China start to get in bed with Russia to support their ambitions in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. You also started to see Biden extend Trump-era policy against China.
That never got talked about.
It didn't, and nobody ever saw it coming.
Yeah, like they were actually somewhat similar.
Yes.
On that.
A lot of what Biden did was take Trump-era China policies, change the name, keep them the same. Right? And that's 4 more years of economic pressure. So then as 2024 started to come, you started really seeing China break down. China's soft power has also started to dry up because all of those investments that they made in third world countries had no return. So all of that money, just like our AID was wasted money, right? That's the argument most people are making. A lot of the Belt and Road Initiative is wasted money. So China's trying to recoup money from all these third world countries that it put on deferred loans. And now they're saying, actually, you owe us this money now because they need more economic capital to come in to make up for their own economic losses. Those economic losses are coming from everything from more support to Russia and increased sanctions from the United States and policies that have been now 6, 8, 10 years running against China. Again, Donald Trump knows what he's doing with these tariffs. He knows that penalizing China with these massive tariffs are going to further destabilize their economy. And since everybody makes economic decisions, that's putting Xi Jinping in a place where he's got to deal with massive economic turmoil. That's going to distract him from so much else of what he has to do. Why does Donald Trump want that? Does he want to protect Taiwan? No. He wants to give the United States enough time to indigenously create our own semiconductor capability, which is a Biden-era policy.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So meaning he only cares about the idea of Taiwan being taken because of the IP they have and that type of...
Because, yeah, and keep in mind, Taiwan's IP is America's IP.
Yeah.
Because America developed the semiconductors.
So he does care about it. He just does. It's not a humanitarian issue.
Right. It's
an
not
economic and trade issue.
It's not a geopolitical issue.
Right.
It's not America's promise to Taiwan. That's not what he's thinking about. That's why he's like, hey, you know what? Let's just have TSMC come here.
Yeah.
Let's just move them here and we'll be good to go.
They're like, sir, no, Taiwan's actually on that part of the map. Not all right, whatever.
Whatever. Just put it here. Can we put it on a boat?
So you think that his growing candidacy that eventually became him winning office was at least a major part of, say, military action not being directly taken by Xi Jinping? Because he had military run-throughs in early 2024. I'm forgetting the dates, correct me in the comments with links, but I think it was like in early 2024 and then mid 2024, and then they kind of stopped.
Right. So what you saw from January through about October of 2024 was all of the increased activity that I and others like me all anticipated would come with the presidential election. Incredible run-up with Chinese pressure against Taiwan. You saw Chinese spies influencing the outcomes of the Taiwanese elections. When the Taiwanese elections were completed and the Kuomintang, which is the pro-China element of government, when they took the parliament and the separatist government took the presidency, that was 100% China's involvement. And that essentially stymied any progress that's going to come from Taiwan for the entirety of the time that president is in power, right? That was January. So in my opinion, China knew we've already won. We won in January because now no policy is going to get passed in Taiwan that's going to make them further separatist. And there's a solid chance that the dude who's coming into power in the United States for the next 4 years isn't going to give two shits about America's promise to Taiwan. He just cares about American semiconductors, right? And TSMC is already talking about going over there, and the Biden CHIP Act is already in motion, and infrastructure is being built there, and he's going to be fine. Again, China wants the 2025 plan for China was to be a major tech influencer, a major tech center of power for the world.
That effect, they have done that.
Bingo. That's exactly right. They have done that. They became the world's largest exporter of electric vehicles. They have robotics. They have semiconductors. They have telecommunications. They have internet capabilities. They are competing still to this day with the United States as the alternative to all American technology. So Xi Jinping can claim that as a win. He can say, by 2025, we wanted to be this. We did. Huzzah. I'm awesome. You guys keep following me. Let's do the next thing. He had his out. And he knows that Taiwan is just a matter of time. He knows that Taiwan will become China's, especially as America distances itself more and more from Taiwan. And the Biden CHIP Act is a very important step in distancing from Taiwan, because we don't care about the country,
Right.
the land. We don't name it as a country, as an independent country in our policy even, right? So Xi Jinping knows it's just a matter of time. How does he do it in the least expensive way? And right now he wants to focus his resources on other challenges that they're having domestically, economically, et cetera.
Do you still view China as a threat, strictly just looking at their GDP and influence in the world? But, you've had a 5-alarm fire in your eyes talking about them in the past with me, as far as like this, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but almost like this weird road to some severe conflict that the two of us will have. Do you still have that type of concern today?
Absolutely. It's not that I've never, again, correct me if I'm wrong or play the footage.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever said that the United States and China are going to go to war with
You've
each
never
other.
said that.
Yeah. So I'm not worried
right.
about some massive
That's why I
conflict.
said conflict.
I'm not worried about some massive direct interstate war between the two of us. Interstate meaning country against country. That's not what I'm concerned with, right? What I'm concerned with is China having enough economic success that it reaches parity, which is equality, with the United States economy. Because the more that we have parity, the more that we have equality, what that really means for Americans is that our quality of life diminishes. Because all the money that comes to us right now, because we're the predominant technical exporter, because we're the predominant financial services exporter, because we're the predominant currency exporter, the more that somebody else catches up to us, the less power we have. And that means our dollar is worth less. Our technology is worth less. Our financial institutions are worth less. And the alternatives that are happening in China are worth more.
Yeah.
That parity is not something the American people want to experience. It means that all the shit that we take for granted goes away. It means the fact that just learning English is enough goes away. Fucking think about that. Think about it. No parent in America is worried about their kid's future when they're a one language person. Every other country in the world
Yes.
worries about their children being a one language child. It's insane. We will lose that if China reaches parity with us, because now your child must learn Mandarin or Cantonese or some other derivation of a dialect if they're going to have success in the world, right? If they're a one language child, they may never amount to much.
So fresh on me. Freedom.